This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review, and what I'm looking at today is 2016's A Cure for Wellness, directed by Gore Verbinski, and I love this movie. And let's be clear, it's not a great movie, but I don't love it for that. What I love it for is that it shows a director at the height of his powers. This is a gorgeous movie, and Verbinski is not afraid of using light and dark to portray mood. Now that sounds fairly obvious, but I've seen so many movies where directors just kind of have the lighting very much uniform at all times. But that's not the case in this movie. It begins very dark and understated, directly relating to the mood the movie is trying to get across. It's a simple thing, but it's not something we see often. And in fact, one of the things I love so much about this movie is that there's a pretentiousness to it. And I mean that in the best possible way. In that you don't know the significance of things. The way Gore Verbinski captures an image, it gives it a significance, an importance, which is fascinating. And I don't know if it is important at all. In fact, I think this movie is not that deep, but it looks deep. It's just so interesting to me. He'll have an image of, let's say, a ballerina, and the way the camera lovingly focuses on it, it feels that this means something. It probably doesn't, but it feels like it means something. And this happens throughout this movie, where things seem to have much more import, much more relevance than they actually do. So let's look at the story. It revolves around this finance company. The board of directors are coming under investigation, and they're looking for a fall guy. Someone has recently left the company to go to a sanitarium in, I want to say, the Swiss Alps. And they send Lockhart, who's played by Dane DeHaan, to retrieve this person, just so they can be a fall guy, essentially. Now, the movie begins with a voiceover explaining why the person who went to the sanitarium is there. Totally unnecessary, because they actually begin to talk about this person during a board meeting. Cut the voiceover. It didn't need to be there at all. And in fact, it's irritating. It's exposition that doesn't need to be told, because, as I mentioned earlier, Gore Verbinski is such a good director. Everything that this person says, you see visually. Now, you could add more into that during a board meeting, which they do. So it was totally redundant and totally unnecessary and irritating. Though this movie failed at the box office. It had a $40 million budget, which in Hollywood terms is not a lot of money. And it made worldwide about $26 million, if I recall. The thing of it is, this movie was hamstrung from the start, because Dane DeHaan is not a leading man. Every few years, Hollywood pushes this guy upon us and says, leading man. He is not. He is a character actor, and he's a damn good one, I think. But he is not a leading man. He's not unattractive, but he's, dare I say, weirdly attractive. He has a very odd face, a very youthful face, but very odd. And the person who should have played Lockhart, I think, should have been older. Didn't have to be much older, but older. Someone who shows his age, physically. So that doesn't work. And as I mentioned earlier, Hollywood keeps trying to force Dane DeHaan on us. Remember, this is the same actor who was the lead in Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, a movie which virtually destroyed a film studio. And guess what? He was badly cast in that as well. He is not a leading man. And whoever cast him as such, at this point, frankly, deserves what they get. So, in any case, he goes to retrieve this guy who was in the sanitarium. The movie switches gears now, and the whole financial shenanigans is secondary to what's going on with the sanitarium. It is an interesting turn of affairs. Kind of bumpy, but this is where Verbinski comes to his fore once again. There's no way of knowing what actually happens in this movie. What's real, what's not real. The plot of the sanitarium is essentially nonsensical, but it's so interesting from a visual sense that it's just hard to interpret because, as I said, events happen and you don't know if they actually happened to the person, if they're just delusions. It's very odd, but it's fascinatingly odd. As I said, I don't think this is necessarily a good movie. I love it, but I don't think it's a good movie. I think it's an interesting movie. I think it's a fascinating movie. I think it's visually just wonderful to look at, but it's not particularly good. And the story is not particularly strong. And that goes to the point I made earlier. I can't tell if this movie is more profound than it actually is. I honestly suspect it's not. I honestly suspect, as I said, it's pretentious silliness. But I'm not sure. And that's just an interesting dilemma for me. And I think Verbinski sometimes gets a little too clever for his own good. For instance, if you look at this scene compared to this scene from the movie Top Secret, it's too on the nose to have been an accident. I mean, it's possible he didn't see Top Secret when this happened. But come on, it's literally the same scene. And that's fascinating too. A Cure for Wellness, I think, is not a good movie. But my God, it's a fascinating one. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.